what this is going to look like going forward. You're going to hear about how we got to this point. And so my goal is to give as much information as possible. From time to time, I'm going to stop and just ask if there's any questions. Feel free to ask questions during or even after, all of those different things. So I would encourage you to engage with this as we go. So Dan, if we could go to the next slide. So why do we need local outreach? And if you can't see this great, or you're wanting to look this over yourself, you're going to get an email of this presentation and more information tomorrow. So if you're like, well, I would love to look at this more in depth, you're going to get more information via email tomorrow. So clear direction. We want to make sure that we understand where we're going. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm pretty lost without a GPS. Is anybody else directionally challenged like that? A couple of you are willing to admit it. That's awesome. There are some of you who are more seasoned that are like, well, just use a map. I remember those days, and I was still terrible at directions. So the reality is that GPS is something that tells us where we're coming from to where we're going. And ultimately, we want to have clear direction in everything we do as a church, but we also want to make sure that we know the direction we're headed and it is aligned with our mission, vision, and values. We also want to make sure that there's clear communication. We want to avoid as much confusion as we possibly can when we talk about outreach. The reality is there are a lot of things we could do for outreach, but there's also a lot of things that we want to make clear that as we communicate it, how we go about doing outreach together, because communication also fosters trust. So we want to make sure that we're engaging in that. Also, we want to ask ourselves, how do we assess what we're doing for outreach? The reality is everything that we do, we should be assessing, is this what God has called us to? Is this beneficial? Is this something that we need to continue doing? And so for us, as a local body, we want to make sure that we package all of this in to our local outreach strategy. Dan, there you go. Man, you already know my clip. I appreciate that. So that shows how much we work together in the back, right? The process of affirming our outreach strategy. I want you guys to understand that this is not a Paul thing. Okay, this is something that we as a church are engaging in. We as a leadership team have engaged in. And when I say leadership team, we've tried to spread the gamut of who has been involved in this. So we started outreach meetings around about the end of January, where we asked ABF leaders, deacons, missions team, key leaders within the church to be a part of some meetings and to also be a part of our, do I have it up there? Our demographic study, yes. So we had a demographic study done January and February, and we asked people to be involved in that, to give their thoughts. Let's talk about it. Let's see what God may call us to do as a church. And after that, we began, after meetings and things like that, I began writing our outreach strategy. Now, as I'm saying writing, once again, I didn't just keep this to myself with all these different thoughts. I sent it out to those same group of leaders and say, I want you to tear this apart. I want us to really dig in. I want you to challenge me. And I am so thankful for the feedback that I received, because it really guided me and helped sharpen even some of my own places of theology, but also practical outworking of outreach. And so for those who've been involved, thank you, thank you, thank you. We also had a season of feedback, like I just talked about, and it was shared with our engaged leaders, deacons, and missions team for their input and feedback, and then submission and vote. And so what we did, I asked from our missions team and our deacon body is to do a vote of affirmation. Now, you may be asking, what's a vote of affirmation? Hey, it's just saying, hey, we affirm the direction of our outreach strategy. In other words, we're willing to take hold. We believe this is important for us as a local body. It's not just something that, it's not just a piece of paper, but it is something we are going to strive to live out as a local body, okay? So that is part of this, is that I wanted to make sure throughout this entire process, this is not just me, this is not just a few people, but this is something that is upheld by the representation and the leadership of Calvary. So with that in mind, I'd ask for some of our church leaders to just talk about some of the outreach and really whatever is on their heart regarding those outreach efforts. And so we're going to start with Pastor Jeff.
Well, we've been talking about this kind of stuff for a long time, and you'll understand this is the main reason for which we felt called of God to bring Pastor Paul here. For the past 7-8 years in particular, I've had very frank conversations with our leadership, the deacons in particular, to say, if we have a choice here, right? We have a choice. We can either bolster our outreach efforts and be serious about ministering to and reaching out to the persons who are in our sphere of influence, this 3.5, 4 mile radius, or we can decide to continue to minister as a church for the next 15 years, and then by God's grace and for His glory, hand this church building over. It's a very real possibility. Hand this church building over to someone who will steward it well with a changing demographic and say, we want you to use all that God has given for His honor and glory in a very meaningful way. Because we have, as a church family, there's still a number of us who have moved out, but there of that 3.5 mile circle, still quite a few who live within it, but that number has decreased over time. And so the need for a focus on outreach in the area where we gather to worship has been needed for a long time. And so we're very thankful that we now have the opportunity to put some thoughts together, some planning together to move forward and leverage some of the connections, the relationships that we have built over a significant period of time. So as senior pastor, I'm excited to move forward in this direction, and I trust that you are as well. It is consistent with our stated mission and with the values that we have. So thank you to all who have been involved. Thank you to Pastor Paul in his leadership of this. And that's good for me. You can go to the next one.
Thank you, Pastor Jeff. Next, I'm going to ask, when you don't remember the order that you sent out, I'm just gonna guess Al Cuthbert. And I would like to say for our missions team, I'm thankful for their engagement in this specifically. I will say, just even personally, like Al and Brian, there you are. You guys have been huge in me thinking through some of these things. And so I appreciate both of you for what you've done with that. So Al, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Thanks, Pastor Paul. We are fully engaged, and I told him I'm personally engaged with that. I want you to know, as a body, there's nothing that speaks more to your missionaries than when we come back to a supporting church that is also reaching out. You send us out to reach out, and I'm sad to say sometimes we come back and we say, I've had some of my supporting churches that have died. I've had supporting churches that have gone off in all kinds of directions. And there's nothing more encouraging when we come back and see that this church is growing, reaching out to their neighborhood. You're supporting us to do it. We ask, why are you doing the same thing? And I really want you to think about that, because it is a major encouragement to us as missionaries. We have Pastor Paul also gives a report to our mission team. When we meet, we will this afternoon, because it is important for us. Outreach is a significant part for your spiritual growth. We could take in the Word. We can be involved in fellowship together. We can be involved in Bible study together. But you have to have a component that's looking out. God's called us all to fulfill the Great Commission. And as Robin and I reach out to our neighbors and the Bible studies in our neighborhood, I want you to think about, what are you doing in your neighbors? And I appreciate that this outreach is not simply a program. It's not simply a ministry of this church. It's a ministry for you as an individual. It reaches out to your neighborhood. You may be outside of this 3.5-mile area, and I'm excited about what God has brought into this radius. Believe me, when we went out to look at the neighborhoods, I realized it's nothing like I thought. In fact, we found some people that were pretty open and willing to talk. Young couples that were having babies, and Brian took later on, after we engaged about 3 of them who were having babies the next 2 weeks, he took back some diapers to those families, just right back behind. You know what they said? We didn't even know there was a church here. Wow. That's pretty sad. That means we have some work to do, folks. And as we reach out to this 3.5 mile, there is a demographic that we need to reach. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about what Pastor Paul has put in planning. I am personally engaged, our mission team too, and I want to encourage you to get engaged too. In fact, I'd like to challenge you to start praying for the neighbors next to you, the neighbors out in front of you. You say, well, I haven't talked to them. Do they even know that you're a Christian? Look at our message this morning, the challenge. Do they even know that you're somebody different than other people, that you're committed to Jesus Christ, that you're committed to following the gospel? It's important that they understand that. We have neighbors that said, we've never met anybody like you guys. That's sad, but that means we have a job to do. And if we're going to reach out, we'd like to see our auditorium filled with many people seeking out a life that's different than where they're going right now. And when we realize the future, look at the judgment, what we talked about. Judgment begins in the house of God, but they're facing a judgment of eternal damnation if they don't come to Christ. So I just want to encourage you, and I want you to know the mission team is fully embraced this project, and we're going to stand with Pastor Paul and the outreach. And I want to encourage you, get involved and start at least praying for people around you to come to Christ. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Al. I appreciate it. And then I'm going to ask Phil McMillan to come up. And let me say the deacons have been also just incredibly involved in this, and I'm so thankful. And for Phil, just his thoughts and questions. And he'll drop a question on me, and I go, ooh, I might need to think about that. And so I appreciate your wisdom in that.
Well, I want to share a little bit of perspective from your elected servants of this church on what outreach might look like. I think we need to address that and think through, what does this mean for me if we began reaching out in those further and further concentric circles out into our community and our circle of accountability? What does that mean for me? What does it look like? And so I appreciate Pastor Paul that he, having led us already through the passage in Acts chapter 2, starting with verse 42, and how the burgeoning early Jerusalem church looked and how it functioned. And I just want to highlight one thing there without going into further details. The highlight that I want to make there is the dynamic that was going on in that assembly. They were people who were fervent for Jesus Christ, probably many of them having just come to a knowledge of Jesus Christ. They were fervent for him. They were eager to hear and understand the apostles' teaching. They were fellowshipping together. They were serving each other. They were doing a vital, living, breathing community together. And sometimes in our ABF, we're studying the book of Revelation, and we run across churches who may have all the good doctrine that we should have as solid churches. We have good teaching and everything, but sometimes there are areas, big pockets, where we've lost the dynamism, the dynamic of a living, breathing entity that is the body of Christ. And so I wanted to go to something that I shared with the men in our last deacons meeting. And that is the process in Acts chapter 6 by which the diaconate was formed, where the assembly selected by virtue of a necessity that cropped out of what was going on in that church, 7 men who were filled with the Spirit and wisdom and were asked to take up a task, a particular task. And it's interesting that that section that speaks to that is bookended by the description of the fact that this was a growing church. And so it says, now in those days when the disciples were increasing in number, and that's the dynamic that was going on. They were increasing in number. There was a movement there, and because of that, there were new challenges that cropped up. And so the apostles said, we can't leave the preaching of the word and our duties in prayer to serve tables. So they gathered all the disciples together and they said, choose out from among you 7 people who are filled with wisdom and with the Spirit, and let them do that ministry of service to the congregation. And so that's what they did. And then the church continued to grow. So what had happened there was that as people were reaching out, as the church was reaching out, they were finding that there were these new demographics coming into their congregation. And not all the demographics were able to connect with each other. And there were some difficulties that cropped out of that. And you might ask yourself, well, how did the disciples know which people they should choose and which people had the wisdom of God and the Holy Spirit? Well, it could very well be that many of them were those that had, first of all, reached out as messenger and brought them to Jesus Christ, and then were mentoring them and serving them as servants, and then together they were forming community. I think that's at least one reason how they knew that these people were the right people. And so if we look at the qualifications in 1 Timothy chapter 3 of the deacons, we understand that these are people who had demonstrated already that they were serving and that they were ready to be part of that new entity that was known as the servants of the church. And so that's one of the qualifications, but that was important because you understand, I think, according to our mission statement, that we are all servants, we are all messengers, and we all form together community. And so it was out of that group. It was because of what happened in that instance that people were selected and gave guidance to that process. So as we think about our outreach, we are going to find that as we reach out, we're going to find people coming into our congregation. One of the greatest things in the world, to see new people coming into the congregation, where we are new and different, we are more dynamic, we are living, we're breathing, we're seeing, but with that comes the challenge of the challenges that come in with them. Just like you and I have raggedy edges and difficulties that we have to deal with, when new people come in, we see the same thing. And sometimes those are more intense than the ones that we have been involved in and are trying to take care of for ourselves. But what a beautiful thing and a challenge to be able to reach out to those people. And then the further out we go in those concentric circles, the more we're going to find that the people that come in by the grace of God are going to be less like us than the others were. And so my thought and my challenge is that as we see those people coming into our congregation, that we need to prepare ourselves. We need to be practicing the service that it takes to walk alongside of people who need that and to live life with them, because that is what we are doing. We're walking alongside of them. We're living life with them so that they can see through the experience of more mature people in the Lord, what it looks like for somebody to have been transformed by the grace of God and to live a life that is pleasing to Christ. And we can say to them, as we try to mentor them, this is how you do that. This is what that looks like. And then by God's grace, we will see more and more strength and maturity come into the lives of those people. So I encourage us all to be practicing and to be reaching out, to be watching, to be looking, and to come alongside of those people.
Thank you so much, Phil. All right, so Dan, let's move to our next slide. And I just want to say once again about all of our leaders, pastoral on down, that we have some great leaders that have been instrumental in this conversation. And so I just want to say once again, publicly, thank you to all of our leaders. So with that in mind, bring me down a little bit, Tim. All right, we'll see if that works. So why have we adopted a local outreach strategy? So once again, you're going to get this in your email, and so I'm going to blow through these pretty quick. At the end of sharing, there's 4 of them. I'm just going to ask if there are any questions up to this point. If you have a question, let me know. If we have enough time to answer it, I'll answer it on the spot. If we don't, I'll just say, hey, let's talk about that afterwards, okay? Because we want to make sure that people are able to go eat lunch, because I know that there can be a time limit. So with that in mind, our outreach strategy clarifies how our goals align with Calvary Baptist Church's mission, vision, and values. It ensures that every effort we make in the community is rooted in our core beliefs and objectives, helping us stay true to our purpose and amplify our impact in ways that reflect our church's identity and mission. One of the things, so what does all that mean? That's a lot of words. What does it mean? It means that we're staying true to who God has called us to be as a local body, more than anything else. There are a lot of outreach things that we can do. The reality is that we have to look at what our mission, vision, and values are and begin to think through how we are going to, how are we going to make that impact, okay? Secondly, we want to explain the reasoning behind the direction of our outreach ministry, both now and in the future. This includes how our current initiatives align with our goals and how we plan to adapt and expand our efforts to meet evolving community needs and fulfill our mission more effectively. In other words, we want not just to say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And so that way we're consistently evaluating as this community changes and evolves, what we're able to do is better understand how we bridge that gap so that we are not static in the same position. The things that you did for outreach 50 years ago, many times do not work in 2024. That's the reality. Now, sometimes they do. Like, I'll be honest, we went door to door at the beginning of the summer, and I'm like, this is going to be a dumb idea. And I'm the one who planned it. So that should tell you something. I'm like, I'm just going to throw it out there. We're going to see how it goes. I don't know if anybody from the church is going to show up. I don't know if anybody's going to answer the door. If we were in the South, I would be concerned that somebody show up with a shotgun. I don't know how this is going to go. These are my actual thoughts. And so the reality is that God just worked through many of the people who did come. For those who did come, we had a great turnout from our church, but they had great stories of what God did through that. And so the reality is that there are things that work that may not, or that we may not have even expected to work. And we want to be able to provide a rationale for what we're doing, why we're trying it, and going from there. So 3, we want to examine our awareness of how discipleship and evangelism are deeply interconnected. We want to recognize that effective outreach involves not only the sharing of the gospel, but also guiding new believers in their spiritual growth, reinforcing the importance of integrating those 2 vital aspects of our faith journey. The reality is that if you look at the Great Commission, you don't just see go, there's actually a second qualifier. What's the second qualifier? Make disciples. As you make disciples, what are they to do? Go. Right? So it is this process by which our discipleship will ultimately impact our going. Our going will ultimately bear fruit in the fact of disciples, which then are discipled, which then go. Okay? So that's what we want to understand, is that a discipleship without evangelism, without engaging the lost, is actually a faith that's missing a puzzle piece. It's missing a cornerstone reality. And so I think that's the most important thing that I can say, is that it's like, well, are we going to stop de-emphasizing discipleship for outreach and evangelism? No. In fact, our outreach is going to actually, for many people, I think for really every believer, it's going to push them in their faith in unexpected ways. You're going to find that as you work beside your brothers and sisters in Christ, that you're going to learn just as you are going together. You may be asked a question that you have never considered on your faith journey. It may be through doing outreach that God convicts you through His Spirit about things that are in your life that you need to hand to Him. And so the reality is that outreach is not this simplistic thing that is separate from discipleship. It is actually the product of our discipleship, okay? And so ultimately, from a discipleship perspective, if we're not going, we're missing the fullness of discipleship. So 4, we want to provide straightforward, actionable steps for our church body to actively participate in local outreach. Here's the thing, we can talk about all this stuff all day long, but if we're not providing opportunities for the church body to get engaged and begin the outworking of this strategy, then we can't, then it's just words. And so we want this to be something that we talk about, but it's something that we do collectively. So next slide for me, Dan. So we're going to define local outreach real quick. Local outreach is the church's organized effort to fulfill the Great Commission within our circle of accountability. As a congregation, we view the area surrounding our church campus as our responsibility to cultivate redemptive relationships. Our goal is to bring glory to God and promote the well-being of our community through intentional, compassionate engagement to the glory of God and the flourishing of His kingdom. So when we talk about local outreach, what we're talking about is the 3.5-mile area around the church. Now, I'm just going to ask you this question. Do you know how many people are in that 3.5-mile circle? Anybody want to guess? Y'all didn't know this was going to be a quiz. Just yell out some numbers. 300,000. Anybody else? 30,000? I heard 10,000. I like the specificity on that one. Roughly 168,000 people live in a 3.5-mile circle. Now, if you just want to have fun, think about it this way. It takes roughly, I think it's 1 in 11 people. No, I don't even want to say this statistic because I'm not 100% sure of it. So never mind, I'm going to take a step back. So that's our definition of local outreach. Next slide, if you would. So defining our circle of accountability. We just did that in that 3.5-mile circle around the church campus. Our main focus is the second paragraph. While our main focus is the area around our church, our influence should reach into all areas we live, work, and play. So here's the reality. While we are focusing on this 3.5-mile area, and part of the reason is this. For me, I drive down 28th Street just about every day for something or another. We pass a lot of different people, a lot of different things. And the reality is that as God's people, this is the way I only know to describe it. When I drive on this church campus, does anybody else see the deer from time to time that's on the church campus? I know some of you hunters would love, like, man, that would be great to hunt. Please don't, because it makes me so happy when I see deer frolicking. What can I say? But I asked one time, like, why are there deer in the middle of this metropolitan area? And there were multiple people who said this. This is an oasis. It's safe. They don't have to worry about hunters. Please don't kill the deer. But the reality is that in the same way that this place is an oasis for those deer, it can very much be an oasis in the middle of a sea of lostness. And the reality is that if we as a people are meeting here, even if we don't live here, I think it's our responsibility to focus on not just being people who drive in to worship God, but that reverberates into the communities that are behind us and around us and the people that we see throughout the community. But it shouldn't stop there. It should also affect, as we go, it should affect our families, our work relationships, our friends. Everything comes back to being transformed as we go forward. And so our expectation is not just in this 3.5 mile area. Once again, our discipleship produces going. And our going is not just in a 3.5 mile boundary, it reverberates throughout our entire life. So with that in mind, we have 4 goals of local outreach. First, before I go any further, do we have any questions up to this point? Sweet. I answered everybody's question. This is nice. All right. 4 goals of local outreach. So we want to first off live out the Great Commission. We just talked about that, is that ultimately go, make disciples. As disciples are made, they are to go. As they go, they are to make disciples. We want to continue that process. Secondly, we want to foster a burden for our area of accountability, which filters into the places we live, work, and play. In other words, we want to be able to serve those here. We want to be able to foster empathy and love so that we may be able to live out and speak the gospel throughout this community, and that it doesn't stay in this community, but it actually goes further out into our lives. We also want to make sure that we want to have stewardship that reflects our burden for our area of accountability. In other words, everything that we steward, we want it to reflect ultimately that we desire to see people to know Christ and to understand what salvation is and what God desires for them. Doesn't mean that every person we talk to in this community is going to come to know Christ. I would love for all 168,000 people in this circle of accountability to come to know Christ. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing? But the reality is that that's probably not going to happen. That would be a God-sized miracle upon God-sized miracle. But the reality is for us to steward ourselves in such a way that we are seeking to speak, live the gospel, and develop relationships in this community for His glory so that we may earn the opportunity to speak the gospel. When we talk about stewardship, I want to be clear. Sometimes we see stewardship and we think it's a buzzword for what? Money. I heard money. That's not just what we're talking about here. We're talking about time. We're talking about your calendar. Let me tell you, if you show me your calendar, and we'll show what's important to you. Pure and simple. And so when we talk about stewardship, we're not just talking about one resource or another. We're talking about the encompassing our entire lives. And that is, fourthly, aligned with our church mission. We want to make sure that everything we do in local outreach is aligned to our church mission. Next one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time unpacking each and every one of these, so I'm just going to kind of explain it. This is the three-level strategy for our local outreach. I call it the relationship pyramid because it's awkward and it's fun to be awkward sometimes. And so this is a 3-step thing. Here's the thing. This is not formulaic. But basically what we want to do is we want to understand that we are going to have introductory relationships. These are people that we're just getting to know, that we're hoping to gain the trust of as we go through ministry or as we seek to live out the gospel. Secondly, the second one is bridge building. Ultimately, what bridge building is it opportunities that further connect or engage with people consistently while meeting or serving their needs. In other words, we're seeing people consistently for a time. So for me, I consider divorce care a bridge building, okay? So by the way, you need to be praying for divorce care. This is, I think, our biggest group we've had so far. But not only that, there's a lot of need in divorce care. And so the reality is that we are able to serve people through this and love them in the midst of a very difficult life circumstance and choices. And so what I would encourage you is to understand that bridge building is something that is consistent, where we are building and developing trusting relationships. And then you see the last one as sustained relationships. This is really partners in ministry. These are consistent relationships. They don't necessarily mean that it's with Christians, but it's people that we've built a relationship with, and we're there to serve them. They trust us. So that can be with people, that can be with non-believers, but it also can be with groups that we network with, nonprofits, other churches, and things like that. So with that in mind, we have some next steps. Before I go to the next steps, stop looking at it, close your eyes if you need to, whatever. Thank you, Dan. The closing the eyes sounded fun to me. Any questions? I know I blew through that. All right, cool. Just as a reminder, you're going to get this information tomorrow morning by email. So you can go ahead to the next one. So what are some next steps? What are some tangible next steps that we can take part in as a church beginning today? First off, partnering with Hand to Hand. Continue supporting through donations, delivering bags to Muley Park Elementary, and continual prayer. Here's the reality, is that our hand-to-hand ministry, because of the faithful work of volunteers, your giving, what it does is it has opened doors for us at Muley Park that were closed. Okay? And so the reality is that your serving has given trust so that we may be able to serve more and more and more. So partnering with Muley Park Elementary, serve as opportunities arise, and Christmas cookies for teachers. This is something I'm still working on. I don't have any details yet, so if you come and ask me details, I'm just going to be like, I don't know yet. And if you'd like to, you're more than willing to help me work through this. I want us to be able to provide cookies for teachers at Muley Park Elementary, possibly another school, but starting out with Muley Park Elementary. And this is just a way to let teachers know that we care. How many teachers do we have in here? Public school teachers. I am totally going to make people feel awkward if there's only one or two of them here. Okay, so here's what I'll say. For those who are public school teachers, here's the thing. We're thankful for all of our teachers, whether you teach in a co-op, whether you teach at home, but our public school teachers are in the thick of it in many different ways. And so sometimes just a simple thing of 2 cookies and saying, hey, we're praying for you, we care about you, it can mean the difference to people. And so what I want us to do is just do something simple so that we can build bridges and introduce ourselves and introduce that we care for people. So with that in mind, you're going to see more information about that later. Also, partnering with West Michigan Friendship Center. Now, I'm going to just ask the question. I don't know how many people know about this ministry. Has anybody ever heard of the West Michigan Friendship Center? The looks of puzzlement tell me that I'm on the right track. So West Michigan Friendship Center, they specialize in reaching out to Muslim refugees, okay, across the world. And so they are a phenomenal group. I cannot say enough about Laura Cronin, who is their director. I can't say enough about the other churches that are partnering with the West Michigan Friendship Center. So the first one that you'll see is a carnival for September 21st. You're going to get some more information about this tomorrow also. And so we're needing some help getting food together so that we can feed about 140 Muslim refugees for a carnival that is being hosted by the West Michigan Friendship Center, okay? And so we need your help with that. There's going to be the opportunity for you to maybe help with some games. If you like soccer, or if you play soccer, or if you think you play soccer, I'm that person right there. The reality is that ability, that joy of playing soccer can be used to connect with people at this carnival. Well, Paul, I don't speak Arabic or whatever language they speak. Neither do I. They, chances are, won't speak great English. Well, that just sounds awkward and hard and difficult. Yeah, but isn't things that God calls us to, for the most part, aren't they hard for His glory? And so I would encourage you that there's going to be opportunity after opportunity for the 21st, but going forward, that you just jump into, okay? That's what this is going to be. We're going to equip as best as we can, but there's also part of this that it's going to be steps of faith. So we also have the opportunity to provide Friday night meals. And I'm going to try to go through these very quick, what they are. As Muslim refugees, they know a couple things. Number one, it gives them a free meal. Gives them the opportunity to come, eat in a safe space. But two, it's also a great cultural activity of learning things about America. So let me ask this. How many of you have ever played Connect 4? A lot of us have, and if you haven't, you need to go buy one and play it, just for fun. The reality is this, is that there are a lot of Muslim refugees who've never played the game. They don't know about American culture. They don't know about these things that we take for granted, even simple board games. And so through those things of helping, giving them exposure to different cultural pieces of America, even if it's a board game, it builds a relationship. And so I would encourage you to consider being a part of one of these meals. You'll be getting some more information about this tomorrow. And so I hope you see a theme going on here. Fourthly, our outreach core class, that will be October 13th, 20th, and 27th, where we're going to dive deeper into what we've talked about today through the compassion of Jesus with West Michigan Friendship Center. And what I would encourage you in is this, is that even if you can't go, that you can pray. So with that in mind, do we have any questions about anything we've talked about this morning? Landon, can you yell out for me? The core class? I'm good with anyone who wants to come and learn more. So, any other questions?
Has anybody ever thought of starting an English class or something?
Jude, that's on my heart. I'm just going to be transparent. But here's the thing. I need people who are willing, that can step into that role. And so I've been praying about that for a year. So no, we don't have any plans, but I'm hoping and praying God's going to open that door. Oh, sorry, my bad. Jude asked if we have considered ESL, teaching English as a second language. So my answer was, I've been praying about that for a year and a half now. We have no plans, but if you're interested in being a part of that, please let me know. We've got some resources that we're looking at. And when I say looking at, I started looking at them a year ago and began praying over them that God would be able to use something. So please let me know if that's something you're interested in. You're not committing, by the way, when you tell me you're interested. You're just saying, hey, I'm interested. Maybe this is something. I don't ever expect an immediate yes. Any other questions? Yep. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. And just to let you know, I'm actually glad you said that, Jeremy, because this kind of jogs my mind, even just to let you guys know about this. My big thing is I want to partner where we can partner. And so one of the things that I've been doing over the past 8 months to a year is trying to develop relationships with churches and organizations so that we can do this not only in partnering with organizations, but other churches. If there's 168,000 people in our area circle of accountability, we can't reach all those people ourselves. So we need to partner with other churches that are like-minded in their faith and theology and doctrine so that we may be able to increase the spread of the kingdom as a whole. And so that is something that I've been working on nonstop. I think we have one more slide. Maybe? Not? We don't. Okay, cool. So you're going to be receiving more information on Monday, okay? Tomorrow. And so as you receive more information, there are a couple things that I want to encourage you in, okay? Number one, every opportunity and everything that you read about, you may not be able to engage in. That is not the expectation. What I would challenge you to do is to take every opportunity, pray about your involvement, and as we communicate, hey, the expectations and the time commitment and things like that, that you would prayerfully consider being a part of it. Okay, so that's the first thing that I'm going to encourage you to do. Secondly, you may be looking, and I think this is for some of our senior saints and for others, the reality is you may be looking and saying, Paul, I can't be as involved as I would love to be involved. My heart's there, but I don't know if I can do it. For whatever reason that may be. And here's what I want to let you know. That's okay, because you know what we need more than anything else in this? Prayer. Please be an example of prayer. Be the prayer partner. In fact, when you receive more information about September 21st, you're going to find that there's an option just to be in prayer for that 2.5, 3 hours of that event. And you're like, Paul, that doesn't seem like a lot. Let me tell you, I've seen prayer do some crazy things in Jesus' name. What if we took the call to prayer seriously and it was led by our senior saints who are showing their faith through consistent prayer? So I just want to challenge you in that. So if you have any questions, I'm going to stay down here that you just want to ask me specifically. If there's anything that you want to talk about regarding our outreach strategy or anything that we're talking through from an outreach perspective, let me know. Let me encourage you in this. Email is great. Conversation is better. And so if you have time, here's what I would encourage you to do. Love to have lunch with you, dinner with you, coffee with you. If you love coffee, then we'll have plenty to talk about, trust me. And so I want to make sure that we engage in a conversation, okay? So please, please, please feel free to ask those questions and be a part of this. With that in mind, I'm trying to figure out, sorry guys, I'm looking through and going, okay, God, who's supposed to be praying for this? Actually, you know what? I already know.